And we're going to be kickstarting this morning's show with a very, very important conversation. The South African Reserve Bank's Monetary Policy Committee will be meeting this week. This is against a backdrop of renewed uncertainty in global markets. Oil prices have climbed. This is as tensions in the Middle East are threatening key shipping routes and raise concerns over supply disruptions. This is all while you and I, ordinary South Africans, are hoping for further interest rate relief after inflation remained within the Reserve Bank's target range. Rising fuel costs and just the general cost of living has gone up, and they could potentially complicate the picture. Higher oil prices don't just affect motorists, people that drive. They have a ripple effect through transport, food prices, manufacturing, and ultimately inflation. So to help us unpack whether the global oil market could change the outlook for interest rates and just the broader economy, we'll be joined by Redge, Nkosi, founder and executive director of Firstsource Money and Public Banking of South Africa, and also a very, very good friend of the show. Well, Nkosi, good morning. Welcome to the show. Always a pleasure.
Thanks, Silaero. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure as well. I want to kickstart, before we even talk about the interest rates, just give us the bigger picture and something which may sound simple, but it has a very, very big impact. Why has the global market become so nervous about oil prices, especially in recent weeks?
Yeah, firstly, I think we go back to Iran, a country, the Islamic Republic of Iran, a country invaded by Israel, the regime in Israel, and the regime in the US, killing the leadership there. And now that war continued for about some 40 days almost. There was some sort of ceasefire, and they're at it again, the same countries, terrorist countries, again destabilizing Iran. And in between the first 40 days and now, there was a ceasefire, and the oil prices were getting down, not just in South Africa, in many, many parts of the world. And we're therefore expecting that we're going to have lowered prices of fuels. And indeed, they went down to almost $70 per barrel. That expectation is now dried up as these countries are back in, fighting Iran for things we do not really understand. They understand it best. To us, we understand it as a domination. So yes, global economy is tightening up. South Africa is tightening up, and we don't see prospects that are positive going ahead, because we see military equipment piling up in the Zionist regime in the Middle East. And it seems to us that Trump is really wanting to continue his act of war against the Islamic Republic of Iran, therefore causing further strain on the global economy and indeed ourselves here in South Africa. That's why we see crude oil now somewhere almost around $90 per barrel as we speak, Brent oil as we speak today.
Very, very concerning. Just how closely does the South African Reserve Bank monitor international oil prices when they're deciding whether to cut or to hold or increase interest rates? Does it have that much of an impact in the broader scheme of things?
Oh, well, it does monitor very, very well. In fact, it's one of the major areas of the exercise to say, okay, where are the pressure points going to come from? And indeed, oil prices are some of the key pressure points that the Reserve Bank looks at before they decide whether to increase or not. And as I see now myself, they're monitoring that, they're realizing that the US is frantically wanting to continue the war, which means the prices are going to shoot up. So they have to act in advance to cool, according to them, to cool the the temperatures, the economic temperatures, or at least the inflationary temperatures, a wrong way altogether. They shouldn't, in fact, be doing that. But most likely that they're going to see that, well, okay, war is continuing, prices are going to go up, inflation is likely to go up, and therefore they must raise the interest rate. That is my view. And they do monitor this very, very closely.
I think earlier on we were told that inflation in South Africa is under control. That's what we heard, coming from the Reserve Bank, and naturally, South Africans had expected another rate card. From your perspective, just looking at the picture in itself, what could we be told later on in the week?
Firstly, there's no inflation that is under control in this country. All the stories of inflation being under control are just stories. Remember, we have no control over inflation as a country. Much of the inflation that we have is on the supply side. In other words, it comes from areas that you and me have no control whatsoever. If war as it is erupting in the Middle East, what control are we going to have? We have nothing. We can raise interest rates to 100%, and oil prices will be going up. They can't go down just because we're raising interest rates. So South Africa is caught up in this quandary where they think that by raising interest rates as a consequence of the external factors, and then the economy and the inflation is going to go down, is good for them, but it's absolutely very unhealthy for the economy. So my expectations, though, going forward, is that given the fact that inflation today, as we speak, is almost at 4%, and the target is at 3%, the tolerance band is 1% minus on plus. So we're within the band. But given the understanding of how the Reserve Bank thinks, my view is that they may have to put another 0.25% percentage points just to think in their idea to control the inflation in the country. Well, in fact, what they're doing is they're messing up the lives of each and every South African, given the pervasive nature of the administrative cost that we call interest rate.
I want to go for a quick break, but when we come back, I want to touch on that specific point, how South Africans are going to be affected should the Reserve Bank announce high interest rates. Just in the most simplest of terms, without the economic jargon, how does you and I and Sbusiso and Mpoy and everyone all across the country going to be feeling the pinch of higher interest rates? But we'll be doing that after the short break.
It's a wonder how kids get anything done these days. With all the distractions, when do they even get time to study? As a mother, all I can really do is make sure they have all they need to perform at their best. That's why I choose to include Sunfoil triple refined pure sunflower oil with every meal I make. Naturally cholesterol-free and approved by the Heart and Stroke Foundation as part of a balanced eating plan. So whether I'm cooking, frying or baking, I know every dish will be a wholesome one. Sunfoil, now we're cooking.
Right now, over 150 million children around the world are orphaned, facing hunger, hardship, and uncertainty. With Islamic Relief's Orphan Sponsorship Program, you can provide a child with access to education, nutritious food, essential healthcare, and a safe home. Your sponsorship is not just support, it's hope, security, and a brighter future. Be the reason an orphan child smiles again. Sponsor an orphan today with Islamic Relief.
Discover the Africa of your dreams and surround yourself with her spectacular beauty. Relax beneath her serene sunsets and explore wildlife at its natural best. It's where the pride of Africa comes together. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve. Get to know the Big Five or cruise on an elephant safari game drive. Interact with lion and tiger cubs and enjoy world-class halal cuisine while we pamper you during your 5-star stay. Indulge in the true African experience. For reservations, call now on 042-203-1400 or visit kwantu.co.za. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve, the place of gathering.
Are you banking with convenience, transparency, and flexibility? With Al Baraka Bank's transactional banking account, you can enjoy convenient everyday banking designed around your needs. Benefit from zero fees on point-of-sale transactions and manage your banking easily through Al Baraka's secure mobile banking app and internet banking platform. From everyday payments to managing your personal or business banking, Al Baraka makes banking simple, transparent, and convenient. Visit albaraka.co.za to learn more. Al Baraka, your partner bank. Al Baraka Bank Limited is an authorized financial services and credit provider.
Rejuvenating media day by day. This is Salam Media.
18 minutes past 8 Central African time. You're still tuned in to News and Views with myself, Salaila Makwidire, and I'm still in conversation with Redge, Nkosi, founder and executive director of Firstsource Money and Public Banking of South Africa. And we're having a conversation around the South African Reserve Bank. They'll be announcing interest rates decision, I think on Thursday, if I'm not mistaken. The governor, Lesotho Kganyago, will be delivering the Monetary Policy Committee decision later on this week. And economists are divided on whether the repo rate will be held steady or increased to combat rising inflation. And Babunkos, before we went into that short break, I wanted to talk about the impact on the ground and how ordinary South Africans could be affected by the decision that Governor Lesotho Kganyago could be making this upcoming Thursday, without the economic jargon, just in the most simplest of terms, so that South Africans know what to expect and how it could be affecting them.
Yeah, thanks very much. Again, let's be clear here. An economy operates on money. There's no economy that really doesn't work on money. Now, money that we talk about, the cost of money is the interest rate. In other words, some people call it the cost of credit, but let's call it the cost of money is more appropriate. What a decision that may come tomorrow will be whether it's one where they say the interest rate is going to go up. In other words, what that would mean is that the cost of any economic activity in this country is going to go up. Meaning, therefore, that we are going to have to dig deeper to simply survive as we survived yesterday. So we are going to get poorer by a decision which says we are going to raise interest rates tomorrow, if that decision is going to be the one. So South Africans will be made poorer by whatever percentage point the governor decides, if he decides to raise the interest rate tomorrow. So that would be therefore the cost to the economy, the cost to every single citizen in this country. In fact, even beyond, by the way. So in simple terms, therefore, if the governor decides that, well, because he wants to fight the inflation to remain at 3% or within the tolerance band of 3-4%, and decides that he wants to raise rates, he is in effect saying he wants to impoverish South Africans by that margin that is going to be raising the interest rate.
Very, very concerning. There's a conversation that, as I was reading, trying to figure all of this out, that, a suggestion or conversation that some economists are starting to argue, and that central banks should probably be looking at, the conversation around temporary oil price shocks. Rather than reacting with higher interest rates. Do you agree that maybe that should be the path that we should be looking into, or is that too risky in South Africa's case?
No, it's not too risky. I think what South Africa should be doing as much as possible is not to jump on the basis that there is a shock in the Middle East, and therefore let's raise interest rates. Because at the end of the day, as I said, if we're going to have to increase the cost of doing business, the cost of living, I mean, what good is that? So I think this idea that people say we shouldn't be so reactive in the manner we have been reacting is sensible. And very often, many countries don't just jump up like the way we do, because they also understand that when you're fighting an economic life, all right, you cannot just use one tool called interest rate to manage an economy. That's that's essentially a foolish idea. That's why many countries, especially those in Asia, simply ignore this thing and use other tools because they want to ensure that the way they manage their economies cannot just simply be dictated but by what's happening in Asia. I mean, in the Middle East. So they moderate their ways of managing the economy instead of just shooting up and well, we have to raise interest rates because they understand the damage can be so severe and can be so permanent to the economy in such a way that for years an economy may not recover. One of the reasons, in fact, why South Africa is not growing is because of this misguided understanding of simply jumping up with interest rates, hitting the economy, and the economy suffers. There's a term in economics that is used. It's actually a scientific term. They say hysteresis. Hysteresis is the case where you simply, knock the economy in such a way that, assuming the economy is the body of a person, if it has been knocked so severely, it becomes paralyzed for a long time without good economic activity. So we avoid such type of things as as knocking the economy with so much interest hikes because it paralyzes the economy for so many years to the extent that everyone gets poorer and poorer. That's why South Africa has been getting poorer almost for the past close to a decade because of this misguided way of dealing with the economy as the Reserve Bank does.
I want to hone in on that. The fact that, South Africa's economy has struggled with weak growth for quite a number of years. If the Reserve Bank does delay cutting rates because of oil prices in the Middle East, what would that mean for businesses trying to invest and create jobs? And could that further exacerbate things like unemployment in the country and just the sluggish general economic growth that we've been seeing over the years?
Well, if the Reserve Bank delays cutting interest rates, then people will begin to think, well, okay, maybe I can do one or two things now. All right. By saying, let me do one or two things now, you are lifting the economy up. You're lifting the employment up. You're lifting taxes up. All right. But if he decides to say, well, let me bomb the country with this administrative cost, then people will pull back. They're not going to invest. By pulling back, you are therefore pulling back joblessness. I mean, your employment is being squeezed. And therefore, the economy continues to grow poorly or not grow at all. So these are the decisions the country has to have when they're deciding, when they have these two choices, either to raise interest rates or not. So yes, quite frankly, jobs will be affected if he thinks that by hammering inflation to about 3%, then the economy will grow. It doesn't grow. So we have had two issues here, if I can be allowed quite quickly to talk about it. On the one hand, on the fiscal side, you've been removing blood, you've been cutting expenditure, removing blood from a sick person called South Africa. All right. On the other side, on the monetary side, you're again removing blood from the same sick person called South Africa. How do we expect this corpse to ever have life? It's dead in the first place. So we've had both the fiscal and monetary side being pushed onto the economy mindlessly by people whose understanding of economics is quite frankly very troublesome.
I want to wrap up this conversation with just how differently should government start thinking, because I think we all know and understand that the Middle East is home to several of the world's biggest oil producers. The Strait of Hormuz, one of the busiest energy shipping routes globally. Most of us didn't even know about it, before the war on Iran by the US and Israel started. But it looks and feels like we are in unprecedented times. How can a government like that of South Africa almost start rethinking and looking forward to long-term solutions to how we source our energy, most importantly? Do we start going the route of renewable energy and local energy security? Do you start importing a bit more from some of the African countries? How should this moment change our perception of oil in particular and our dependency towards the Middle East?
Yeah, very important indeed. In fact, is a strategic question, and the response has to be very, very strategic as well. There's no doubt that dependence on oil does affect countries, as we have now seen, and as we continue to see today. Therefore, the future could be one where we should be less and less dependent on fuels that are so volatile. So yes, the possibility of going the renewables route is understandable. But we must remember that the renewables route has always been about wind and sun. All right. But these are natural issues. You cannot fully depend on them. So we have to go through changes. Say, why can't we be using gas, for example? Why can't we be using nuclear, which at least we have some control over? Okay, so such costs will be incurred once, like Quebec that we have, and we have for years costs that do not go up and down, or at least if they do, they go down. So South Africa must continue to invest in areas of energy that are sustainable. Gas is one, nuclear is another. Well, obviously the sun, it's okay, and wind are okay, but they're very troublesome, as we have come to see. Countries like Germany that have invested so heavily in these renewables are now complaining, and the cost is so high. And we cannot, I think, go that route. But nonetheless, we should be spending our money in that direction. But also, apart from the fact that, because oil is with us, we have to begin to manage our economy in such a way that we buffer ourselves against such effects as the oil shock in the Middle East. In other words, we should have reserves that can last us so many months, to the extent that gives you leeway to maneuver, instead of just having a 3-day or 5-day reserve of oil that you have as a country. So I think there are quite a few ways in which South Africa can do, but I'm afraid the leadership has failed us, and we should accept that. And perhaps it's time that we changed our leaders.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very important conversation to have. Redge Nkosi, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us and for giving us your time.
Thanks, Derail.
There you go, Redge Nkosi, founder and executive director of Firstsource Money and Public Banking of South Africa. Yeah, helping us unpack just how global oil markets could influence South Africa's interest rate outlook. And yeah, I think all eyes will be on Governor Lesetja Kganyago on Thursday as he announces the decisions that the Reserve Bank has made when it comes to repo rates for you and I, South Africans. Sheesh, scary times. Going to take a quick break. We'll be back with you after this.